way you're not viewing all that gravel and junk through there. We have yet really to convince the Department of Transportation to get rid of the woven wire fence. We'll continue to work on that. We haven't found a good solution for that. That's their indications to us that the wire fence is there to control pedestrian movement and then also to help discourage people cutting off the road, you know, a little 10-foot median off the interstate and jumping down to the service road. So I think...
But he did, Lowell at the Highway Department did indicate he would look at, if anybody else comes up with a better idea, he would certainly take a look at it.
Yes, that is correct. Yep. So they're open to it. They just don't know what the idea is of it.
And I think if I remember right, they indicated that they like that woven wire so much because it collapses in the case of an accident, whereas a concrete wall, you just you're into it.
Yeah.
So they kind of looked at it from sort of a safety aspect.
Yeah, because we looked at chain link fence, and they said, oh, that creates a projectile, and so we still haven't found a solution for the woven wire. So if you have a solution, write it down.
Keeps wildlife off the interstate too.
Yeah, yep, exactly. The other thing that we talked about today, and there's a board in the back about different policy recommendations that would help us achieve some of these goals. The stuff that's in the right-of-way is really at the mercy of the Department of Transportation and federal highways. And then the local governments contribute funds to build things above and beyond their minimums. And so that currently happens today. The improvements you're seeing at the Shoshone Interchange, the Wyoming Boulevard stuff, those are all contributed by the local governments to get those nice things in there. Beyond the right-of-way, we want to talk about particular issues that may affect private property owners. And the one thing that the committee discussed today is that they didn't feel like it was appropriate enough just to come in and, you know, come with some hard and fast rules of what needs to be done with those properties. But rather we want to come in as a partnership with property owners. If there's a way to incentivize them to improve their properties by providing technical assistance, low-interest loan programs. We also talked about doing a Friends of the I-25 corridor, establishing a nonprofit organization where you can all have memberships, and that can be a generation for you know, different ideas that you might have or things that you may help. This happens a lot in downtown areas where you create community partnerships. They can do a revolving loan program, so if you're someone who's out by the corridor and you want to rehab a facade in the building, you can go to them and get a grant, maybe a matching facade grant, or get some technical assistance or something else to help you along. And we discussed various options from zoning changes to tax assessments to all sorts of things. And I think the committee has kind of landed on the opportunity of some sort of nonprofit or business-oriented group consisting of the property owners along the corridor and others who would want to contribute to that, to really take the lead on that and kind of work with each other, kind of a grassroots type thing other than a government top-down type situation. There's some, seem to be some positive movement, and would you agree, Terry, from some of those discussions to really take a look at how we want to do that. Short of that, some ideas for new development along the corridor. So if you've got an empty lot and someone wants to bring a building in, well, the next steps of the plan would be to consider maybe a zoning overlay district where you may want to request like storage areas, maybe not flip from the interstate side, but maybe to the side yards. Just start to work on reshifting the built environment throughout that corridor. And so that's something that would go beyond the plan. It'll probably be a recommendation of the plan to check on the feasibility of that. The one thing that came out of our listening sessions in terms of policy was the fact that when you come in and you ask people to improve their property, and if they do invest in it, what, you know, someone said, what do you get out of that? Oh, you get a higher property value and a higher property tax bill. And so, you know, try to think of some ways, they said that's kind of decentivizing. You know, you put improvements in it and you're rewarded with higher taxes. Is there a way to kind of offset that for the first couple of years through tax abatements and that sort of things? Those are things that this plan will solve, but those are ideas that can be put forth to your policymakers and governing bodies for other considerations. we talked about in terms of policy is wayfinding throughout the corridor. Because the corridor is so confined, there's not a lot of room for additional signs that say, you know, cool fishing over here, you know, biking trails over there. So the thing we talked about today is really thinking about our arrival sequence as we get to Casper. Because on either end of Casper, there's 40 miles where you have people's undivided attention, you know, as you're starting to approach that. And the idea is maybe instead of focusing on those narrow right-of-ways where you don't have a lot of room to make a big impact, we just kind of pick on pockets as you start to arrive towards the community of doing, you know, maybe a sculpture piece that talks about, you know, the oxen and the trail, you know, exit, see the Trails Museum and exit, blah, blah, blah. And so that's kind of, that's not really something that the government would be able to spend tax dollars on outside of their jurisdictions. It'd have to be make sure it's within the county and all those types of things. But if you did have a nonprofit group dedicated to that, like a chamber or something else, those are real distinct ideas that create that interest and excitement before you arrive to the Casper community to get that through there. Let's see, going through my notes here. The newest thing that Lowell with the Department of Transportation discussed today too, when we started the project in the long-range transportation plan, there really was no indication of doing anything to any of the bridges throughout the corridor, with the exception of the Shoshone interchange. Well, Lowell announced today that they have put a request in for in 2021 the replacement of the railroad bridges at Wall Street, just down the hill from here. And so they would actually bring the Interstate 25 bridge down in elevation a little bit because it doesn't need to function as a railroad underpass anymore, so the bridge deck would come down. And so they would be rebuilding that. And so really in 6 short years, that's an opportunity to implement some of these ideas that we have created through the design simulations. As a community, you'd want to maybe think about what kind of theme might go well for that. We suggested maybe a railroad theme, giving homage to the rails to trails trail that you have there. And then just make sure that we're working with the department as their bridge engineers are already starting work on this, that they're accounting for putting in a form liner with some sort of decorative element to that. And so those are kind of the things that this plan really stimulates. And the Department of Transportation is like, yeah, if you have that in our plan, you know, I can make sure our bridge engineers are accounting for that as they're doing their engineering and they're further refining their budgets. And that's really kind of the intent of the plan. So really the next steps here, I want to get your feedback tonight if you think these are good ideas, if you have ideas for themes, if you know people who may want to help out and continue moving on the plan. We'll be preparing a final draft plan for review, for the community review in local government. We need to integrate the results into the geographic system or the mapping system that the community has. And then those governments will begin to make the process of doing any policy changes to the way that they do business and any revisions to the code. It's my understanding that the community is due for an update to your comprehensive policy. All these things can be integrated into that policy as they move forward. Andrew, do you have anything else really to add?
No, I think pretty much covered it. Again, I'd probably just emphasize that these are just concepts, they're ideas, they're potential projects that we might see in the future. So nothing is necessarily going to happen on the freeway until there is a project where we can implement some of these things. And so this particular project, again, is giving us a vision for what we would like to see on the freeway, and hopefully you can provide us with input that would help shape those different alternatives. So, yeah, that's basically all I have to add.
Well, is there any questions?
How much did you guys make for this presentation?
How much?
How much are you paid for this presentation, and who paid it? Whether it was county commissioners or city council or?
The entire project was a contract for $50,000, paid for through 90% through the federal government and about 10% through local funds from all of the member agencies. All of
Which are?
Casper, Natrona County, Mills, Evansville, bar none.
Thank you.
I would just like to make a comment. I would like to see Casper. I know this is a freeway project, but like even underpass, like I said, I take occasionally I take Blackmore underpass, and it's our city is not other than the Platte River Parkway is not a bike friendly city really at all, and I personally would like to see I mean it looks wonderful with your bike lanes there and all, but I mean, it doesn't show all the traffic. I mean, more than likely, unless things get widened up a bit, I don't know. I'm just kind of throwing that out there.
So, to quickly clarify from almost more of a traffic standpoint, that there's just too much, like safety standpoint.
Yes.
Yeah,
like it's just too congested to have a bike next to it.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said, I noticed, the Blackmore underpass. I'm like looking at that, I'm going, the before and the after, and everything looks wonderful. But I'm looking, I'm going, there is not enough room there to have that, that sidewalk where people walk.
Or the bike lane. I mean, we're trucks up and down this highway all day long, every day.
Yeah.
How many people are going to be splattered with something like this?
But I think it makes you start thinking about, well, what could this be? We could have bike lanes. How do we make that work?
I would love to.
So it makes you take the next step. It starts a conversation.
And what the intent really behind the plan is, again, to kind of give us a toolbox of different themes, different textures, different lighting options, different things that we would like to implement as a community. And whether that's a bike lane at Blackmore or whatnot, it really depends on the funding that's available and whether we have those options available at the time.
Sometimes I feel that our city doesn't look ahead far enough, like that Blackmore underpass is so narrow already that didn't they think that, someday they might want to have somebody walking underneath there or riding their bike under there? Obviously not. And I could say the same thing for our aquatics center, but I won't get into that. Anyway.
Joey, do you have cost estimates for the proposed interchange for the visualization? So you say, to make this happen, $20 million, which was 18, or maybe the individual elements. The paint's 18,000, the sculpture's 24,000, something like that.
They're so unique and individual to that. You'd have to actually get to the design engineering phase of it. We weren't working with CAD files or anything like that. Basically just working off of photographs at this type of level of thing. I believe the Shoshone interchange enhancements that you'll be seeing, the sign, associated landscaping, and stuff like that. I want to say that was roughly about $250,000. So they can add up fairly quickly on that. We talked about potential grant sources at our committee meeting today. I think if you do embrace the opportunity to get creative with some of your themes, there's like the National Endowment for the Arts, those types of grant sources, and Wyoming has a great base of foundations that really support arts and culture in the state. I think you could really tap into those sources if you're showing them that you want to do creative public art strategies within your transportation infrastructure. Yes, ma'am.
You also said that you guys had been around doing this in Casper since October 2014. Well, I just attended Business Alliance on, May 11th? And that's when they said they were breaking up into committee for this. So either your guys are been around doing this for a long time and this Business Alliance didn't know about it, or somebody got their lines crossed, because I'm getting two different stories. Like, this was just recently brought up. This is just brand new for us to consider and the whole bit. But you're talking, you've already had committee meetings on this. You've already had visioning meetings on this and all of that. But the Business Alliance didn't act like that at all when I sat in on their meeting. They acted like this was the first time this was coming out.
Members of the technical committee for this project include representatives from each government that has property adjacent to the freeway, the Chamber of Commerce, the Economic Development Agency, CADA, was invited. The Convention and Visitors Bureau was a part of it as well. So, I'm not terribly familiar with the...
They were all present at that. I mean, CADA was represented, and God, I don't know, probably 25 developers and 50 real estate people. I didn't see very many landowners that own property along these highways. I saw a lot of the developers and real estate guys, but...
I'm not familiar with the event. I can't speak to it.
So you don't know the Business Alliance, who they are?
Personally, no.
Thank you.
Sounds like a great group to get involved.
They're the one that supposedly thought of this.
Yeah, and actually to go back to the bike ped thing, that was one question that we kind of dealt with the interchanges at Far None. I mean, we were talking with the Department of Transportation. They were kind of, their position starting out was, well, there's nobody walking there now. So therefore, we do not need to provide that because there's not a demand for that. And then our approach was, yeah, but you put in that interchange and you get a gas station there and you build the houses out to there. Pretty soon you got the kids walking on the highway to the gas station. And so really, including a lot of this type of things, intervisual simulations, was really to kind of help them visualize what that would be as well. It's not as big of a deal as they feel like it may be. If you can kind of visualize it, it's a little bit more realistic. You can kind of start to brainstorm ideas on how you might make it work versus just kind of saying, well, nobody's walking there now, so obviously you don't need a sidewalk. So the effort on the purpose of the plan is to kind of flip that conversation and be like, oh yeah, I saw a picture where they did that bike lane. Is that something that we can do, at Wardell Interchange or that sort of thing. So that was really the intent of a lot of these visual simulations, like Jared said, to start stimulating that conversation.
Well, there's been scuttlebutt for a long time, and you've probably talked to this, Mr. Pilcher, of a truck stop north of town. I don't know if that's just talk or what.
No, Whiteout's made it impossible.
So it's just scuttlebutt.
They have pretty much a no, but not only no, but no way attitude.
What interchange is that supposed to be at?
Pardon me?
Where are they gonna put this new interchange that they're talking about?
Oh, up on top of the hill with gravel pit.
Oh.
Is where they've got the mine now. Because that'll tie the road in out to the rail facility behind the airport.
That's in to make it now, isn't it?
Well,
That's correct.
Theoretically, someday.
It's scheduled for construction in 2018.
Pardon me?
It's scheduled for construction in 2018.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Has it gone that far along?
And the truck stop ain't gonna fly out there, then?
It would have to be permitted, land would have to be purchased, and it would have to be worth someone's while. And remember, Whiteout fights progress tooth and nail. I've got a stack of, I possess a stack of letters where they fought my projects tooth and nail since 1960. The theory that they're business pro is a false one indeed. It makes for a wonderful presentation, but it's not a based in reality presentation. It's first no, but hell no.
It's not unique to only your,
It should be the other way. I agree. It should be the other way. But it just isn't.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, with this going on, there's going to come a time where there's going to be code enforcement involved for businesses and private properties that are along these corridors. What do you see going to happen with that? I mean, is people going to suddenly be required to put up fencing and screening to hide, their business equipment, whether it be oil field or propane tanks or whatever? And with that, the reason that these people had bought these properties to begin with was they paid high prices for these properties to be located along these main corridors, not only for advertisement, but also for the room. They paid extra money for this. And if they're going to be, code enforcement's going to suddenly come in and say, you know, we don't like the way your oil field equipment looks from the highway. We're going to want you to screen. Now you're essentially taking these people's rights to be what they were when they bought their properties. It's also known as a grandfathering use. And I spent a lot of money fighting for this in this town, and I'm not going to let this happen to anyone else. This is etched in stone. If somebody's using your land or your business area for what it is, they're not going to be subject to your pretty police. So how do you see dealing with these businesses that are going to be classified as eyesores by our newest plan to beautify our corridors?
Well, I think, you know, you definitely want to, first of all, establish a working relationship with the business owners. It's definitely a partnership. You know, we all know if we come in kind of top-heavy, government top-down, nobody really enjoys that type of a process. And so it really does need to be more of a grassroots coming back up from that. You know, if property owners have a desire to improve their property and there's opportunities and ideas out there, they should have opportunities to resources to fulfill their vision. And as people brought up in the listening sessions, that if they do make the investments in their property, that they shouldn't be penalized for that. And so I think we need to look at you know, creative ways to incentivize businesses to do that. You know, I recently worked with an RV dealership along an interstate corridor in Billings where they bought in the county and they did just that. They bought interstate frontage because they liked the visibility of it, the access to the land, the right at the entryway into town, and they were kind of surprised at their particular area of the zoning, which they must have figured out after they bought the property, required, you know, trees for every 25 foot of right-of-way along that interstate corridor. And they were concerned about that. And, you know, of course, the reason for that is that we want nice, beautiful green corridors, but at the same time, the businesses have a right to, like you mentioned, they paid extra for that frontage property on there and utilize that as an incentive for their business. You know, working with them, you know, we talked about different ways that code can be interpreted. You don't necessarily need to plant the row of trees in that corridor, but maybe you can cluster them and that you would identify key views so that key signage on the property is still visible and maintained. Interesting building features can be incorporated into their design where they can do that. Or perhaps if they, you know, they separate kind of the landscaping to provide those views and then they put the landscaping in the back or reshape that around. I think there's ways that you can work with that instead of penalizing that property owner for that. So
you're asking them to spend more money on their property because you don't like the way it looks. Is that correct?
No, not at all. We're saying that working within the existing codes and regulations that you need to partner with the community to make a win-win for everybody.
Judy, as you well know, when I was on the commission, the way I see it, no one wants to stifle, is that the right word, stifle, any current businesses along the interstate. I would think the city fathers, county commissioners, and whoever would want to work with them. And, you know, hopefully we can all come to an agreement, like you were saying, to work hand in hand. Because I wouldn't want to hurt any business along the interstate.
I mean, if you think about it, Terry, a lot of those guys that bought those frontage properties have stuff. Think of the guy with the tanks out there, the one with the oil field equipment coming in from the airport. Hell, there's probably a dozen like that there. I mean, what are we going to suddenly do? Say, look, guys, we don't like the way your stuff looks, so we're going to either ticket you if you don't comply with what we're telling you to do. You're making more lawsuits is what you're doing when you start messing with people's property. What if they don't want to put slats in their fences and they don't want to put trees up? I mean, then what? You know what I mean? I mean, you can ask people to do things and you can work with them, but by God, you better not try to force them to do it because you're picking for blood.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody's suggesting that at all, honestly. I think we want to be able to work within our community rights of ways and emphasize those things that are within the public domain and get those corridors, the medians looking nice as you come into town. Let's get the wire fences repaired. Let's get the gravel swept up. Let's get the paint done on the bridges. You know, I think those little things will really go a long way to accomplish your goals that you're trying to achieve through this plan. Any other questions? Well, great. I appreciate everybody for coming tonight, and thank you. Please fill out your green forms, and your feedback is important to us, and we look forward to any ideas that you may have. Thank you.